Fortnite has been around for over 6 years, and in that time there have been tons of different weapons added and removed from the game. And as someone who has been playing all the way since the beginning, I've experienced just about every weapon in the game, and today I'm going to be going over every weapon that has been permanently removed from the game, so let's just get right into it. First up, we have the Zapatron, which is the only weapon I was never actually able to play with when it was in the game due to it being extremely rare and also getting removed really quickly. It was something that only came in legendary rarity, and it was also only obtainable through supply drops, which is what made it so hard to get. It was kind of like a railgun as it shot energy cells instead of normal bullets, and you could charge it up to deal with more damage or just charge it up a little bit and shoot more shots. It was a long range weapon, and honestly there's not much more to say about it since we just haven't really seen it in action much. So let's move on to the next weapon, which is actually a trap, and this was the ceiling zapper. Now this is something that I do remember since it was and still is in Save the World, which is actually how I ended up starting with Fortnite before Battle Royale even came out. As the name states, this was a trap that was only available to be used on the ceiling, and it did damage through a zapping effect. This could only target one person at a time, which I thought was weird since it shot multiple beams of lightning and covered the whole area, which would make you think that it did damage to whatever was inside, but obviously that wasn't the case. This trap would do 125 damage, which I think was a pretty fair amount for the time considering there were no minis or slurp barrels or anything. Plus they made a little bit of noise, so if you were playing with audio then you could obviously hear the trap and proceed with a little more caution. Overall this was a decent trap, but I definitely do understand why it was removed since the normal spike trap was just better and more versatile, and it made the ceiling zap trap kind of redundant. And speaking of the spike trap, I know that it is currently removed from the game right now, but it has been in and out of the game enough times that I don't think we can consider it to be permanently gone yet. And something similar to the ceiling zapper is actually the wall dynamo, and this was basically the ceiling zapper but placeable on walls, and it would be removed at the same time as a zapper, and the dynamo is similar enough to the zapper that I'm not going to waste time talking about it. But next up we have the original SMG. Now I honestly really miss this one, and mainly just the way that it sounded since I honestly really liked that. Plus it also was just a really strong SMG and was pretty accurate and didn't really spray everywhere, and I think that was a good thing since it only went up to rare, and I can't think of just how strong it would be if it had even higher rarities. The rare version also was able to fit one more piece of ammo in its clip, with it holding 38 instead of the 37, which I thought was pretty cool at the time since no other gun really did that. But overall I really like the SMG, but I honestly can't even really complain about it being gone since the TAC SMG has been around quite a bit and that is pretty similar. But next up we have the guided missile, and I honestly have so many different memories of this one. This was essentially a rocket that you could control, and it is what would allow for you to be able to rocket ride by yourself, and that was just super fun. Plus it was just a really good weapon to mess around with, and it will lead to tons of funny moments with people flying the rockets through windows or doors into houses where people were hiding, since people tend to hide in buildings rather than building their own thing, as it wasn't as big of a thing then as it is now. Plus I remember there were a lot of those hide and seek videos where people would be seeking using the guided missiles, and overall I really think that was just a super fun weapon, and I really wanted to get added back again since I didn't even get to play for that long, as I was still playing using the trackpad on my laptop and you couldn't control the guided missile that well using a trackpad, and I wouldn't get a mouse until the last 2 or 3 weeks of the guided missile being in the game. But anyways, the next removed weapon will be the original crossbow, which is something that we haven't seen since chapter 1 season 9. I know that the Cupid variant was in the game after that, and the normal crossbow would end up being added into creative in chapter 5, but it hasn't actually been in the game itself. Another interesting thing is that the crossbow was originally added to the game as a Cupid's crossbow, but it was changed to the normal one after Valentine's was over, and the Cupid variant would only make one more appearance like I just mentioned. The crossbow honestly wasn't really anything special, and I definitely do prefer the newer variants that have come out, with my favorite one being the poison one. But the thing with the crossbows was that there was actually a whole game mode for them, which is called Love Shot, and this was for the Cupid version in February of 2019. And the reason I mention this is because I actually ended up winning a game, and it was one of my first ever Fortnite videos on an older channel of mine, and this is the gameplay of that. And before anyone says in the comments, there's no way that I'm going to show this channel channel, since in all honesty, those videos are absolutely trash, and I was like maybe 12 or 13, so it obviously sounded really weird. But anyways, let's move on to the next weapon, which is the OG revolver that will be completely removed from the game sometime in chapter 2 because it would end up being replaced with a new revolver. Now, if I'm gonna be honest, I never was a big fan of the revolver, mainly because I just sucked with it, so it is honestly something that I would never pick up past the early game. The reason for this is because you couldn't aim it precisely enough, and that is why I really just prefer the hand cannon, which is basically just a much better version of the revolver because of how precise it is. But next up, we have the LMG, and this one is really interesting. I honestly never really liked it because the recoil on it was insane, and you really just didn't want to be seen carrying a LMG because it was seen as like a noob weapon and something that people with no skill will carry because they could just spray with it, and it was something that was kind of annoying to come up against in normal games, especially if they were just outside your wall and were spraying and you couldn't do anything about it, since at the time people weren't really all that quick with their edits. However, this was like a goated weapon in the 50v50 game mode, and you would just hear it everywhere since it was the best option against so many people, since you didn't have to worry about reloading as much. So overall, I really think that this was an interesting gun and it was fun at times. But something that wasn't as fun was the mechs. And I know that this technically counts as a vehicle, but it could shoot and it was really more so used for fighting than movement, so I'll count it as a weapon. These were like absolutely broken and really unfair to play against, especially when they first got added. You could get absolutely deleted with the rockets and you would basically be doomed if the mech people knew what they were doing. And to be honest, the mechs are really what made me quit the game for the first time in season 10. I originally didn't like the whole futuristic stuff from season 9, and the addition of the mechs really just ruined it for me and will cause me to stop playing the game until chapter 2. So overall, I really hated the mechs, and honestly the cars right now in the game really remind me of the mechs just because of how broken they are, and that is why I'm not really even playing the season that much. But anyways, the next thing will be the airplanes, since these could also shoot, and unlike the mechs, I really like the airplanes and I really want them to get added back into the game. I know they did come back for the OG season, but that really was like a one-off thing, and I don't count that as them actually coming back. The planes were really fun because they were actually really good for movement, but they were also really loud and you couldn't exactly sneak up on someone with an airplane unless they had their audio off. Plus the airplanes could shoot, but that wasn't broken or that strong in any way, and I think it was really balanced. And the planes overall were just really good for trick shotting and just messing around with overall, and I really enjoyed them. But next up, we have the semi-auto sniper, and honestly I don't mind this being removed from the game. I personally never really liked it since the whole point of a sniper is to be able to deal a ton of damage at once, but with the semi, it didn't really do too much damage for a sniper and it wasn't reliable enough to hit consistent shots. Plus, I think it is honestly just one of those cringe weapons that only people who can't use proper weapons use, which is kind of how it was with the tac versus the pump. But with that, we have all the removed weapons that have been gone for a really long time and are basically permanently removed. There are some weapons like the Thanos gauntlet that I didn't go over just since they were supposed to be like one-off things, so it wouldn't really make sense to include them. But if I missed any others, then please let me know down in the comments, since there are a ton of weapons that have been in the game and I'm sure I missed at least one or two. But with that, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video and I'll see you all in the next one.